Hey there, everybody. Welcome. It's Lotus, Art of Sacred Embodiment. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining me, for subscribing, for liking. If all of this resonates with you and you find it helpful, we're going to talk again today about relational intimacy. And we're going to talk about perspective and perception and the ways in which we continually move through what I would say small t, right? Small truth perspectives into capital T perspectives. So those small truths, those small moments of where we come to new levels of awareness, right? But we don't necessarily need to identify with them because it's just a part of our growth process. And then there are those truths that come in when we have anchored in more levels of wholeness, where our perspectives are broader, wider, and can account for a number of other conditions within our experience, whereas the small t truths tend to be a little bit more limited, tend to be a little bit more biased, tend to be a little bit more, not a little bit more, but they come from our wounding, right? From our fears, from our doubts, from our hurts. So a quick example like of small t truth, we could say that right after I got sober and I was in AA and started feeling more of my feelings, right? I was able to get in touch with the anger towards my parents. So, I think we all, maybe not everybody, but a lot of us go through those phases where, we're against our parents, it's our parents' fault, or we blame our parents for A, B, C, and D in our life because maybe we don't know yet that we chose our parents and karmically they're perfect to 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 help us grow in the ways that each soul really needs to. But so I went through that phase, right, from a small t truth. I needed to have my feelings. I needed to have my anger. I needed to create boundaries for a period of time. I needed to be able to speak my truth of my perceptions and what I felt like I experienced, right, when I was younger. And I needed to voice them. And for a while, I think I probably identified with them. But then, of course, as healing progresses, I realized, oh, it wasn't actually all their fault, right? They're not perfect beings. They had their, they were doing the best that they could, and, they did an amazing job. I love my childhood and my young adulthood, maybe in my teenage years, maybe. Now I can say that. So there were those moments when I realized it wasn't actually them, right? This was all from my learning. So then as we move into romantic relationships, we take all that baggage with us. And that baggage is the perceptions and perspectives that we're viewing everything that's happening through. And that's going to depend on the degree of our non-healed selves, or the parts that are separated or distorted. So, like, ideally we're going to move from the karmic phase. The karmic phase, we want to remember, if you're in karmic phase in stage of relationship, meaning it's really messy, it's entangled, it's codependent, it's fine. It's there to begin to wake us up to look at ourselves and to recognize our pains and our wounds and begin to pull our energy back. And it starts from looking outside and getting triggered, right? Looking at what's wrong, so to speak, at someone else and putting the focus external. That's what the karmic relationships do. And until we start looking inside and recognizing, oh, this is here for a reason. This is here for my growth, for my own transformation, for my own healing. at that point, we move into conscious stages of relationship. And then we're moving towards sacred union. So it's an ongoing process. And depending on where you're at in your journey, right, it's gonna take a long time, or maybe you're already in those conscious relationship phases and stages and there's still always clearer seeing to have, but it's not messy, it's not dramatic, it's not traumatic. You're just kind of clarifying and refining, and then sacred union brings us into those levels of really soulful honoring and our divinity, right? And seeing the divine in our beloved. So I'm going to share an example because I love doing examples, and direct experience is the way I roll. So, after I was in healing relationships, and a deep healing relationship, conscious relationship for a period of time, and then I met my my husband to be, and now my ex-husband. I was a little bit surprised during this experience to see how quickly and how much I could sort of swing back into that part of me that I thought had already healed. But being in a new relationship, I got to see my own inner dynamic in full swing. However, I had new tools and new skills in which to operate. So we had just started seeing each other. It was probably a month or two into the relationship, and he lived outside of town. He was working on an organic farm at the time. This was up in Portland, Oregon, or outside of Portland, but that's where he was living. He'd come in on the weekends and he'd bring this, bags of fresh, yummy produce, and it was amazing and fabulous. And usually he'd come in on Fridays and then he'd leave on Sundays because it was a bit of a drive back out into the country. So this one weekend, and again, we'd been seeing each other for a while, and we had been hanging out one Sunday, and we started getting a little bit deeper in our conversation and revealings, and I think that day I had, maybe sort of opened up a little bit more and gotten a little bit more vulnerable and shared some things that I still carried a certain amount of embarrassment about or shame about. And so I was kind of working with my edges of intimacy and practicing stepping into that arena and really wanting to share more of all of me, right? So later on in the day, he usually left on Sundays. We got back to my place, and he was really quiet. And his quietness started triggering me. Because I had just been more open and sharing, I immediately started going into stories of, oh my gosh, he's judging me. He doesn't, he's gonna break up with me. He doesn't want to be with me, and so I was watching and feeling, right? I was tuning in. This is what I work with clients with, right? What is your body sensations? I was really paying attention to what was going on in my body, and where the storylines were anchored somatically, and what the emotions were, and where I was contracting, right? All those nuances, and trying to get out of the mouse. But I was in the mouse. I was in the field, right? I could not see beyond the tall grass, and I was feeling afraid, and I was feeling, the impending rejection, and all the while he's just, I don't know, like meandering around, maybe picking up a book and reading it, and being in his own space. And I think I was doing something with food, or I just remember like being in the kitchen and sort of in my own inner turmoil. And and I was so caught in rejection mode and fear of rejection and fear of judgment that I couldn't actually see clearly and that he was just actually just hanging out. Right? He was just relaxed. He wasn't like busting a move, so to speak, to pack his bag and get out of there. He wasn't even planning, he wasn't showing any signs of leaving. And yet I couldn't actually receive that because the only thing that I could see, it was like seeing through my second chakra, seeing through my wounding, seeing through my fear. That consciousness is rooted in that second chakra. So I was in essence seeing through those eyes. And so finally I realized I just needed to say something, right? I just needed to get clear and be honest and open up even further. So I, went up to him and I just said, so I just need to, like talk with you for a minute. And he was like, sure, what's going on? And I said, I'm really aware that I have a lot of fears coming up in me, that after some of the things that I shared today, that you are going to break up with me and you're being really quiet, and so this is really triggering, right? These emotions and these feelings in me and these fear, and I just need to check in. Is this true or not? Right? Like, am I seeing clearly, or what is accurate? He just kind of looked at me and he was like quiet for a minute, and he was like, no, not at all. I was actually thinking that, maybe I would just go ahead and stay tonight. We could have dinner and watch a movie. Right? So I just started crying, right? I started crying because there was all of this emotion, and I was shocked that I still, was carrying that deep wounding. And and I was so grateful that I had the skills and that he was somebody that was receptive, right? That he was at a level that he could listen and receive and just be clear and didn't get caught in my loop. And that was a great, we went on to have a great evening. So it's really important when we're in romantic relationships, because these are our tenderest spaces and places, that we learn the skills, first of all, to know what's going on within us, and that we recognize these different levels of awareness and our own growth and maturation, right? And that I believe that we actively pursue that. Because otherwise, when we're only operating from our limited, wounded perspective, we only see our thoughts. Had I not had the skills and had not gone through the initiations and the learning processes that I had over the previous, number of years, that could have turned into me reacting. And that reaction, right, in my old persona might have been picking a fight or giving a cold shoulder and shutting down and not saying anything, or saying something that might have been a little sideways, or assuming that he was going to break up, and so I might have, I don't know what I would have done at that. I don't remember what I would have done, really. But, right, and then we begin ping-ponging off of one another. It doesn't serve anybody. right? It creates more and more layers and levels of messiness. So the perspectives that we live from, you can check this out in your own relationships, right? Take a moment and look, how are those dynamics, right? Do you only see your person through your point of view? Do you only see them as operating from the way that you project upon them? Do you check in and ask? Do you open up and, your own truth and say something to the effect of, wow, like I'm really sensing and feeling that maybe you're angry with me. Is this true? Or is this about something else and it's just rolling over into our interactions rather than reacting back in anger? Or, I'm feeling a little vulnerable. I feel like we don't have the type of relationship that I'd really love to have. Do you still love me? Do you still care? Because the way you speak to me makes me feel like maybe you don't, right? So when we're working with intimacy, we have to be connected inside first and foremost, and we have to be willing to extend ourselves outward. And it's really important to be aware that our perceptions are not true a lot of the time when we're living from unhealed spaces and places within us. So I'm going to give one more quick example, which this was a mind blower to me. It took 38 years for me well, almost 40 actually, to get the clear aha of what I felt like went down with my first love. And I'm gonna open this up because, this was fairly recent. This was only within the last year that, like, it was ding, 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 ding. It blew me away. So even though there were so many layers that I had resolved, right, within that first love relationship, and 38 years later, I was able to get pieces of that resolution with this person. I still kind of had this sight, right? This limited sight that he, like, I was the only one, I guess I could say, that was hurt, right? That his breaking up with me, that I was the only one that was heartbroken. And within the last year, I had this moment where I had to do another deeper level of my own healing and seeing myself more clearly and really recognizing that leading up to the breakup, I was mean, right? Because I had been in fear, because I had been vulnerable, because I had been afraid that he didn't love me anymore, my drinking escalated and I shut down. And the last tail end of our relationship, I became mean. And I realized, oh my gosh, and again, I don't have clarification, right? Person to person clarification, because I don't know his perspective completely. And but for me, I had to look at the fact like, oh my gosh, I was really hurtful. I was kind of cold. I was actually mean. And that just devastated me, that I treated him in these ways because I loved him so much. And how could I have treated him that way? Well, because I was coming from wounding, because I was coming from fear. And and will I ever have an opportunity to express that to him and to really understand his point of view? I don't know. But at this point of time, the clearest view that I can get above the field, I thought I had already had an eagle view, right? But there were so many layers that I had no idea how many layers there were to my own healing from this relationship and what I needed to see about me. It took 40 years for me to really get a clear view of myself and how I acted and how I responded and how I acted out in very hurtful ways. So I wouldn't have seen that then because I was so caught up in what I perceived he was doing to me. So I think I'm going to end that here. And hopefully this gives you some pause for reflection. What stage and phase are you in your relationship? Are you clear? Do you know how to get clear, right? Can you and your partner be open and honest, and do you know how to navigate clear communication? And or have you already, moved through those phases and stages, and are you ready now to move into deeper phases and stages of intimacy, of not just, healing anymore, but living from that place of fullness? And what does that mean, right? Or are you single? And are you working towards preparing for a healthy and whole, loving and vibrant and intimate relationship, right? So many angles we can take our romantic partnerships in, and it all begins with us. It all begins with our own internal relationship with self and self-love and clear seeing and honoring all parts of us, right? The shadow and the light. So that is it for now. Links are below if you are interested in diving into your own personal work deeper. And I will see you again. Many blessings and much love.